There is one serious problem in this world, which, from the past until now, has always been a special concern for all countries in the world, namely social inequality. Social inequality becomes a serious problem because when the wealth between the rich and the poor is very different, this can create injustice between the rich and the poor. Even worse, when the wealth of the rich is much greater than that of the poor. This can give the rich more control over the poor, where these rich people can more freely make policies that make the poor even poorer. For example, you must know this thing, fiat money, or fiat money that we use every day. For those of you who often read news about the economy, you must have heard of inflation, and this inflation occurs when the currency we hold weakens in value, and this makes the price of goods around it feel more expensive than usual. For example, let's say last year the price of bread was $1 per piece, and this year, the price of bread has increased to $2 per piece. This is what makes the price of bread feel more expensive, not only because the price of bread has increased, but also because the value of the currency we hold is always decreasing. So to maintain the value of our money, so that it does not decrease due to inflation, we need something called investment. The problem is, for people who do not have access to investment instruments, that can beat the inflation that occurs. This causes the money they have to always decrease over time, or in slang terms, they become poorer, because the value of their money is always being reduced by what is called inflation. Maybe you have an argument. In this day and age, anyone can access investment from their mobile phone. Yes, it is true that anyone can download an application for investment, but not everyone is at the ideal point to start investing. Some may still be in debt, have to support their parents, and other problems. And this also clearly has an impact on social inequality, where people who are poor become poorer, while the rich, who understand how to control it, actually become richer. To know how far the social inequality is in this world, I want to show you a study from Oxfam, which says that 1% of the richest people in the world control 2/3 of global wealth. So in short, 66% of global wealth is controlled by 1% of the richest people in the world, while the rest is controlled by 99% of other humans. You can imagine how far the social gap is in this world. That's why many countries have a strong ambition to eradicate poverty, so that this inequality is not too far, but I think it's very far. If a country has a strong ambition to eradicate all poverty that exists, because actually, this world needs the poor to run this world. Therefore, in this video, I will explain why the world always needs the poor, and I will also explain that poverty cannot be eradicated in this world because there are several obstacles from the poor themselves. So, watch it until the end. One of the root causes of why poverty is still needed is because of capitalism. Here I am not saying that capitalism is good or bad, but what I mean is that capitalism needs poverty to run its own system. Before that, I will explain first what capitalism is. Simply put, capitalism is an economic system that frees the private sector to control the means of production to seek economic profit. So in this system, anyone is allowed to have their own business without much control from the government, and one of the orientations of capitalism is to seek the greatest possible profit with the smallest possible capital. Actually, there are many more parts, but simply put, why do I say that capitalism needs the poor to run its system? Now look at this picture. This is a picture of the pyramid of capitalism, where in this picture, humans are in the capitalist system. They have their respective positions, based on their economic class, but if we look deeper in this pyramid, there are humans, who are at the bottom, as the main foundation. In the capitalist system, one party or group is needed, who can be a scapegoat to fill the lowest position, so that the pyramid does not collapse. Not many people understand the real financial system and slavery, because basically, this system needs stupid people to be scapegoats. Stupid here means they don't understand how this system works. That's why they will always be at the bottom. This pyramid will be destroyed if all the people below start to think about how to get to the top, because when many people below leave their positions, this pyramid will collapse. So there will be many challenges for people from the lower classes to rise to the top. It can be indoctrination through the media, the surrounding environment, even the education system, which consciously or unconsciously kills our critical thinking to think about how to rise to the top. The point is that in this capitalist system, we need people from the lower classes to be the foundation for running this system. Simply put, capitalism is an economic system that frees anyone to control the means of production, meaning anyone is free to start a business. When someone starts their own business, they definitely need laborers or workers. Well, if there were no more poor people and all humans lived in prosperity, there would be no more people who had a worker mentality, because when someone works, their main goal is to find money to meet their needs. If, for example, everyone is prosperous without any shortages, no one will want to be a worker anymore, because what's the point, right? Well, if, for example, there are no more workers, the impact can be on all of humanity, because when there are no more workers, the mentality of the workers results in companies closing down, and automatically the goods that are our daily needs are hampered, because their production stops. That's why the poor are always kept in their positions, so that there are still people who want to do the job. Because if, for example, everyone is prosperous, who else wants to be a driver? And who else wants to sweep and mop the floor? That's why we still need, and even always need, this lower economic class. I'm not belittling any profession, but this is an illustration that we need people who are willing to do this job to actually earn money. This can be called an evil session of capitalism, where this system always needs the lower class to do low-wage jobs. But that's how capitalism works. Precisely when there are no more lower-class people, this world will fall apart and not run as it should. Maybe this is an interesting question. If the world is fair, but not everyone can become rich, actually, everyone has the same opportunity to become rich, because there is nothing that prohibits anyone from becoming rich, but not everyone has the same access to take advantage of that opportunity. For example, poverty is divided into two. There is structural poverty and there is cultural poverty. Cultural poverty is poverty caused by oneself, such as being lazy to study, lazy to work, not daring to take risks, and so on. These are factors that exist within ourselves, while structural poverty is poverty caused by factors outside of us. For example, being born into a poor family, living in an area prone to war, government policies that are detrimental to us, and so on. If cultural poverty may still be possible, but if children are born with structural poverty, they do not have access to take advantage of the opportunity to become rich, even though they are legitimate to become rich. Just imagine children born in Middle Eastern countries that are prone to war. Even though they have the same opportunity to become rich, their access to take advantage of that opportunity is limited by their own country. Likewise, from a cultural perspective, even though they also have the same opportunity to become rich, but there are other factors that limit them, even though it is within their control. For example, even though we all know that one of the factors to become rich is hard work, but not everyone has a high work ethic. Besides that, also from a person's perspective and perception when looking at wealth, there are also people who prefer to live a relaxed life, rather than ambitiously pursuing wealth, even though if they are given wealth, they will definitely want to. It is usually between their mentality that they want something that is balanced with happiness. They don't want to spend a lot of time on work or indeed have other goals than spending their energy and time to pursue wealth. That is why not everyone can be rich, because there are limitations for each individual, so that we cannot equalize our economic conditions. As a result, we have different perspectives and ways of thinking about wealth. Even if we draw the outline, everyone definitely wants to be rich. In addition, being rich is not about nominal, but a comparison of someone can be said to be rich when the wealth he has is higher than the majority of people around him. Now, if, for example, everyone in this world becomes a billionaire, the term rich is just an illusion, because if you really want to be rich among billionaires, you have to be a trillionaire, even though we have seen, if everyone can be rich, aka there will always be a poor class. But that does not mean that the problem of extreme social inequality is a phenomenon that must be left alone, because social inequality, that is, too severe, can actually cause exploitation of the upper class to the lower class, which creates misery for the lower party. So what the government does is not eradicate poverty, but reduce the distance of social happiness and increase the standards of the poor themselves. For example, previously the income of the poor was $1,000. Now it is $1,300. This is just an example, because no matter what ambition we have to eradicate poverty, sorry to say, we still need the poor. Now the question is, which group do you want to be in? Do you want to be part of the minority that is in the upper class or the lower class? It may sound a bit harsh that the world needs the poor, but that is the fact that wealth is not just nominal but also comparative. In fact, rich people exist because of poor people, and we cannot deny that rich people need the energy of poor people for their work, and on the other hand, poor people also need the money of rich people to fulfill their needs. So between the rich and the poor, both have their respective portions and roles, because actually the problem is not the rich and the poor, but the social inequality, which is increasingly far apart. What do you think? Why do we always need the poor, and why can't all of them become rich? Try writing in the comments column.